I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
It makes you think that at a fundamental level, this is sort of a he said, she said, right? And at the end of the day, do you believe Donald Trump, who always tells the truth? Just kidding. Or do you believe that woman on that tape?
I cannot stand Trump because I think he's a fraud. Well, I think he's a total fraud that is exploiting these people, who is a total fraud.
Like I said, I agree with you on Trump because I don't think that he's the person. I don't think he actually cares about folks.
So J.D. Vance is out here pretending to be America's moral compass. But this week, he couldn't find north if it was tattooed on a Chick-fil-A wrapper. You know, this guy went from writing Hillbilly Elegy, the book about escaping poverty, to becoming the vice president of the very system he said was broken. It's like writing a diet book and then opening an all-you-can-eat buffet. He flew to Europe for the Munich Security Conference, gave this speech about how Europe is afraid of its voters, which is hilarious because back home he's afraid of his own.
Vice President Maybelline was making the rounds, attempting to defend his boss and the chairman of the FCC with a new fairy tale even a 5-year-old wouldn't believe.
Celebrities are rallying to his cause, saying this is a First Amendment assault being carried out by the FCC, Brendan Carr, and by the President of the United States himself. And to that, you say?
Well, there are two things. First of all, I'd like them to tell me exactly what Brendan Carr did to have Jimmy Kimmel taken off the air, because number one, he is currently on the air, and to the extent that he isn't in certain stations, it's because he's not funny and because his ratings aren't very good.
I have some good news for you, J-Dog. We're back on all the stations.
The audience is still settling into their seats, and you can hear that familiar low theater buzz as people find their places and put their phones away. The band gradually lowers the volume until the music fades out completely, and then Jimmy Kimmel walks onto the stage with that look he always has, like he already knows exactly where the joke is going before he even says a word. He casually taps his cue cards on the desk, looks straight into the camera, and announces that he's officially back on all stations again. The crowd immediately explodes with applause, and it feels less like a reaction and more like a huge release, as if a rumor that had been hanging around for ages just finally fell apart. Then, without missing a beat, he completely changes gears, turns his attention to J.D. Vance, and drops a nickname so sharp and strangely specific that it sounds like it could be printed on a product label: Vice President Maybelline.
He acts like he's out there defending the working class, but the second Trump frowns, JD changes his entire belief system faster than a Tesla stock price. And remember, this is the same JD Vance who once called Trump America's moral disaster. He literally said Trump was cultural heroin. Then he met him, and now he's his dealer. He's out there pushing the same stuff he used to warn people about.
There is definitely an element of Donald Trump's support that has its basis in racism or xenophobia. I think there's a chance, if I feel like Trump has a really good chance of winning, that I might have to hold my nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. I think that I'm going to vote third party because I can't stomach Trump. I think that he's noxious and is leading the white working class to a very dark place.
The joke lands in that weird way only great comedy can, or it hits both someone's image and their ego at the exact same time. It's not the kind of line that simply takes a shot at someone, it feels like it exposes something deeper underneath. You can almost imagine someone in a communications office somewhere spilling their coffee in complete disbelief the moment it lands. At the same time, there's probably a senator sitting perfectly still, acting like the joke never reached him while furiously typing out a response he'll most likely delete before anyone sees it. Meanwhile, across social media, a familiar figure in politics, often seen as the loyal ally of the 47th president, suddenly starts looking less like the strategist in control and more like part of the joke itself. In trying to shift the conversation back to ratings, he only ends up feeding the moment and making it bigger. And that's exactly why this blew up so quickly, because none of it felt random. What happened unfolded almost like a perfectly timed chain reaction, a three-stage sequence that built on itself step by step.
To interrupt your bullshit, go on.
There's something else that's important here, Laura, which is that these broadcast companies, ABC, NBC, CBS, they enjoy the public airwaves because they serve the public interest. So I actually think that we should be having a conversation about whether these companies are serving the public interest. That's actually totally separate from the Jimmy Kimmel issue because nothing happened to him. He's currently on the air, and to the extent that he's not, it's because advertisers don't like him because his ratings aren't very good.
My ratings aren't very good. Last time I checked, your ratings were somewhere between a hair in your salad and chlamydia. In 3.5 years, I'm not the one who's going to be doing mascara tutorials on YouTube.
He spent part of his week warning Americans that dating apps are more destructive than artificial intelligence. Really? AI is writing your speeches, buddy. You're worried about Tinder when the robots are learning how to lie better than you? He says online dating is tearing apart traditional families. The guy works for a man who has 3 marriages and 5 kids who all look like they share one Wi-Fi password. You want to lecture America about stable homes? You work for the Trump family, not the Brady Bunch.
Step 1 happened just before Brooklyn Week, when J.D. Vance visited Friendly Studios and openly suggested that Jimmy Kimmel's short absence was connected to poor ratings. He presented it less like a guess and more like a confident conclusion, as if the case had already been settled. He also argued that Kimmel owed apologies to people he believed had been unfairly targeted or slandered, delivering every word with such a straight face that it made the whole thing feel even more intentional. Then came step 2. Kimmel returned to the spotlight with the lights seeming brighter than usual and the energy noticeably sharper. Almost immediately, he made it clear that he was back across all stations. And then he turned his attention to Vance and dropped one brutal line, Vice President Maybelline. It was the kind of joke that instantly sticks, the kind that feels like it becomes part of the conversation the second it's said. Step 3 came when Vance tried to take back control of the narrative through Fox, demanding an apology and arguing that the joke somehow proved his original point. But instead of sounding calm and in command, the response felt more like frustration breaking through the surface, almost like a carefully packaged tantrum. And in the end, that reaction became just as much a part of the story as the joke itself.
How did we wind up with a president and a vice president who wear more makeup than Kylie Jenner and Lady Gaga combined? A lot of pressure on J.D. Vance tonight. J.D. Vance hasn't been under a microscope like this since his wife asked him why the couch was so sticky. But Trump had good advice. He told him, just have fun. And you know what? It seems like he did.
I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are.
That's how you get the single cat ladies back on your side. You know, in some ways, you can't help but you kind of feel sympathy for J.D. Vance having to defend Donald Trump, who he himself openly denounced. It's kind of like being Diddy's defense attorney, you know?
The reason Kimmel's line worked so well is that it did a lot more than just criticize someone. In just a few words, it managed to package an entire image and put it on display. It touched on the performance, the focus on appearance, the carefully crafted tough guy image for the cameras, and that constant effort to look calm and in control even when what's underneath seems a little less solid. The nickname worked almost like a mirror, and the uncomfortable part was how quickly people recognized what it was reflecting back. Once Kimmel followed it up with another joke about presentation and image, the audience started connecting the dots almost instantly. The message underneath became hard to miss. This wasn't really about policy or political arguments in the traditional sense. It was about presentation, branding, and what happens when that carefully managed image starts to show cracks under the spotlight of public attention.
JD talks about family values while backing a president who spends more time golfing than parenting. He says men need to reclaim masculinity. Yeah, by all means, tell that to your boss, the man whose spray tan wipes off on the American flag. He's made himself the mascot of the forgotten working class, except the only thing he remembers is which billionaire is writing the campaign check this week. Every photo op he does has him in a barn wearing flannel talking about coal jobs, while the fine print says, made possible by Peter Thiel. The man's political soul is sponsored content.
One of Kimmel's most underrated strengths is how controlled his delivery really is. Even when the material is sharp or critical, he never feels the need to raise his voice or spend 5 minutes explaining why the joke is supposed to be funny. Instead, he presents the quote, adds one carefully chosen comment, and then lets the silence do the rest of the work. It's almost like slow-cooked humor. The impact doesn't hit all at once. It builds gradually, sometimes even after the words have already left the room. That's a big reason why so many of his moments stick around longer than the typical late-night reaction that gets a quick laugh and is forgotten the next day. On this particular night, he let Vance's comments hang in the air just long enough for people to really think about them, hearing phrases like bad ratings and political spin echo back in their own minds. He didn't launch into a long argument or try to debate every point. He simply stated that he was back on all stations, and somehow that alone changed the entire mood of the exchange.
Both candidates were pretty darn polite to each other.
First of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. I agree, and I actually think I agree with you. I actually agree with Tim Walz.
I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said. Governor, I agree with you. I agree with that.
And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agreed.
Well, Trump is not going to like that at all. You're in a lot of trouble, JD. I was kind of hoping they'd ask the candidates like some fun questions. Like, you know, they used to do that. Like, is a hot dog a sandwich? And then J.D. Vance would stare into the camera and say, when you're from Haiti, any dog can be a sandwich. But they didn't. There was no. They could have used a lot more talk about cats and dog eating.
And every time he opens his mouth about culture, it's a new episode of Things Nobody Asked. One week it's dating apps, the next it's birth control, the next it's women being too career focused. He's like the cranky uncle at Thanksgiving who thinks feminism is a weather pattern. Then there's his big claim that America's in moral decline because people don't go to church enough. You know what else causes moral decline? Electing a guy who tried to overthrow democracy. But sure, tell me more about how Bumble is ruining society. He says he wants to stand up to global elites. Really? You flew to Munich in a private jet to say that, buddy? That's like yelling down with yachts from the deck of your own. J.D. Vance is what happens when populism goes to finishing school.
That single line about being back carried a lot more weight than it seemed to at first. It didn't sound defensive, and it definitely didn't come across like someone trying to dodge criticism. If anything, it felt like someone stepping back into the spotlight, reclaiming the space completely, and turning what was supposed to be an attack into a moment that worked in his favor. When you look at it that way, J.D. Vance's strong reaction afterward starts to make a lot more sense. Being hit with a nickname that catches on isn't just about the joke itself, it's about how long that joke can live. The real discomfort comes from the fact that it's short enough for people to repeat effortlessly, but specific enough that it keeps resurfacing every time that person's name comes up. You can push back against policies, argue over statements, or debate opinions, but it's much harder to fight a label once it has already grabbed the public's attention and started sticking in people's minds.
Last night he posted an announcement. He said, I will be doing a personal play-by-play of the debate tomorrow between the brilliant J.D. Vance and the highly inarticulate tampon Tim Walz. I hope that cognitively challenged lion Kamala Harris will be listening so that she can again show the world how she will make up false facts and stories. I will be commenting on what is going on. Watch Truth Social tomorrow night. Watch Truth Social.
He wants to be seen as the people's champion, but he speaks like he's auditioning to narrate a documentary called The Death of Irony. And let's not forget, when the shutdown hit, he was silent while millions of Americans were wondering if they'd get food stamps. He didn't fight for them. He was too busy tweeting about real patriots and woke tech overlords. You know who cares about SNAP benefits? The people you wrote about in your book, JD, remember them? The ones who can't afford your lecture tour ticket?
That's exactly how the internet takes control of moments like this. Once a phrase like Maybelline gets out into the public conversation, it starts popping up everywhere, often in places nobody expected. Before long, every time Vance appears on camera with a serious expression, people automatically think back to the joke. The timing played a huge role too. Vance made those comments while rumors about Kimmel's status were already circulating, which probably made him seem like an easy target at the time. But history has a funny way of working against those assumptions. Often, the moment people start saying someone is fading into irrelevance is the exact moment they come back and remind everyone they're still very much in the picture. What made Kimmel's response stand out was how controlled it was. There was no chaos, no overreaction, and no long-winded defense. It was simple, direct, and confident. By calmly stating that he was back on all stations, he effectively wiped away the idea that he was disappearing in the first place and shifted the conversation onto entirely different ground.
Every time he gets on stage, he tries to sound tough. He says things like, "We're fighting for real Americans." Yeah, the real Americans who live in his imagination, the ones who still think the earth is flat and vaccines are witchcraft. J.D. Vance wants you to believe he's the next great conservative thinker, but he's really just Trump with a library card. He's got all the bluster, half the charisma, and none of the self-awareness. You can tell he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, but the only reason he looks that way is because the rest of his party keeps setting the bar underground. Look, JD, I'll give you credit. It's not easy to sell out your own book.
From there, he shifted the focus back to Vance and wrapped everything up with remarkable precision, leaving very little room for the conversation to grow beyond that moment. Even the audience's reaction seemed to reflect that. It felt like everyone in the room understood that the peak had already happened and the point had landed exactly where it was supposed to. But the bigger picture goes beyond a single comment or a single joke. Kimmel wasn't just responding to one remark, he was responding to a broader pattern that has become increasingly common common in political communication, where satire is often treated as a personal attack and criticism is framed as a form of censorship. That ongoing clash between entertainment and political messaging created the perfect conditions for this moment to catch fire. It also showed how quickly modern media cycles can turn personality-driven commentary into major headlines, especially when the reaction to the original moment becomes just as important, and sometimes even more important, than the moment itself.
On the biggest night of J.D. Vance's career, his running mate, he's telling his followers, watch me on Truth Social, commenting on it. And here is some video of Mar-a-Lago watching tonight from home.
Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump.
That approach really comes down to two things: precision and timing. Kimmel tends to rely on direct quotes, very little extra commentary, and a pace that gives the audience enough room to absorb what was just said instead of rushing them to the next point. That rhythm is a big part of why some of his lines stay in people's minds far longer than expected. In this case, the reaction from J.D. Vance ended up confirming just how much impact the joke had. When a public figure responds quickly and emotionally, it often suggests that the comment hit a particularly sensitive spot. What made the situation even more interesting was that the attempt to reframe the joke as bullying only brought more attention to it. In a strange way, it had the opposite effect. The quickest way to keep a punchline alive is often to react strongly to it, especially when that reaction happens on the same public stage where the joke was delivered in the first place.
I'm Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. The mainstream media, they want you to think that I'm weird. They call me creepy, cringy, awkward, that I give people something called the ick. They want you to think that I can't order a simple donut. But that's ridiculous. Follow me.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay. How long you worked here?
A year?
Okay.
Donut.
That's how a single line can move from just a joke into something that actually sticks in political commentary. It starts becoming part of a larger narrative that people keep bringing up again and again, often completely outside the original context. Even Kimmel's brief pause after delivering the joke played a role here, because it didn't feel like he was building toward more, it felt like a clear ending. There was no over-explaining, no adding extra layers, just a moment of silence that made it obvious the audience had already gotten it. That kind of restraint is a big part of what made the moment feel so intentional. And once the reaction in the room settled down, it became clear that the line had already done exactly what it was supposed to do.
It takes talent to write a story about fighting for your community and end it by joining the guy who mocked that same community on national TV. That's a full circle moment. It's like if the guy from the Lorax bought a chainsaw company. So congrats, J.D. Vance, the man who went from voice of the people to ventriloquist dummy of the powerful. You're proof that hypocrisy isn't dead. It just got a podcast.
Some people might say moments like this don't really matter when you compare them to actual policy discussions. And there's definitely some truth to that. But the reality is, public perception isn't shaped by policy alone. It's also shaped by culture, framing, and the way figures are presented in the public eye. Once a political figure gets tied to certain images or jokes, those associations start influencing how people process everything else they say. And when performance and presentation go unchecked, they can slowly start to overshadow substance altogether. That's exactly why moments like this tend to catch on. Even if on the surface they seem light or just comedic, they end up sticking for reasons that go beyond the joke itself.
Brought inflation down to practically zero. And all of the groceries and all of the eggs and all of the things that you've been hearing about, they're back down. They're way down from where they were. I did something in 4 months that nobody's seen. And I have to say, in 4 months, and I said it before, and everyone's talking about it all over the world, we've got the hottest country anywhere in the world right now. We're the only country anybody's even talking about.
It's true, but they're talking about us in the same way people talk about the Diddy trial. It's with curiosity, disbelief, and revulsion.
Comments that you've made about Donald Trump. You've said, I'm a never Trump guy, never liked him. Terrible candidate, idiot if you voted for him, might be America's Hitler, might be a cynical a-hole, cultural heroine, noxious and reprehensible.
Trump is a really bad candidate, and frankly, I think a really bad person.
Over time, Kimmel has developed a style that leans less on direct confrontation and more on breaking things down. Instead of building long, detailed arguments, he takes a moment and strips it down into something simple, something instantly recognizable. In this case, he turned a public image into a punchline that's easy to remember and even easier to repeat. At the same time, there's a bigger backdrop here too, where late-night shows often become part of wider political and cultural debates, with public officials regularly weighing in on them. That ongoing dynamic adds another layer to why moments like this don't just stay in the entertainment space, they get amplified and turned into something much larger.
It's illegal under the Logan Act for private citizens to engage in foreign policy that undercuts America. But this J.D. Vance, before he made up the Haitians eating dogs story, he tweeted, "Trump makes people I care about afraid. Immigrants, Muslims, etc. Because of this, I find him reprehensible. God wants better of us." I agree with the statement you no longer agree with. Of course, he deleted those tweets once he realized he could be Trump's running mate.
If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to America Facticity for more breaking news and late night truth. And let me know in the comments, what's worse, J.D. Vance's speeches or his dating app paranoia? Because honestly, I think both might be swiping left on America.
In the end, the audience reaction made one thing pretty clear. The moment had already grown beyond the studio itself and started taking on a life of its own. Even the attempts to brush it off or dismiss it ended up doing the opposite, only making it more visible. That's part of why the impact felt bigger than just a single broadcast segment. It ended up tying together performance, reaction, and public interpretation into one continuous loop. And once a cycle like that starts moving, it becomes very hard to slow it down, let alone stop it from spreading further.
You know, as civil as the debate was, the troll-in-chief was not. He didn't like the fact that Tim Walz uses the word folks. He wrote, "Folks, Tampon Tim stealing Crooked Joe's signature catchphrase. Sad." He also didn't like the idea that Tim Walz was taking notes. Why Walz is taking so many notes, never seen a candidate take more. He needs the notes to keep his brain intact. And if that isn't the pumpkin calling the basketball orange, I don't know what is.